Establishing central control, this pawn grab immediately stakes a claim on key squares and opens diagonals. Establishing central presence now prepares for a balanced battle over the crucial squares. Challenging the center, c4 immediately creates dynamism, vying for central space and opening lines for piece development. Solidifying the center, black anchors the pawn chain, preparing for queenside expansion and a robust defensive setup. Opening the d-file for immediate pressure, white sacrifices tempo for central pawn removal and potential piece activity. Reclaiming the pawn on d5 now solidifies black's central pawn structure, creating a stable base for future piece development and control of the d-file. Developing a knight to a central square enhances piece coordination and prepares for further queenside pressure. Asserting central presence, the knight strategically bolsters the pawn chain and prepares for future queenside expansion. Seizing central space, this pawn thrust immediately challenges black's pawn structure, demanding a decisive reaction. Solidifying the center while preparing for a pawn chain allows development, but concedes some central influence. Opening the d-file invites piece activity, beware of central pawn weakness. Recapturing with the d-pawn solidifies black's pawn structure and opens a diagonal for the queen. Developing the bishop aggressively pins the knight, immediately posing a tactical dilemma for black and disrupting their pawn structure's harmony. Developing the knight to its natural outpost, this move simultaneously prepares castling and maintains pressure on the central squares. Bolstering the center's pawn structure, white reinforces central control and prepares for further development, aiming to build a stable, active position. Developing the bishop to a natural square prepares for kingside castling and harmonizes the queenside minor pieces. Establishing a knight outpost at e5 now pressures the d7 pawn and curbs black's central ambitions effectively. Fortifying the bishop's post, this maneuver skillfully prepares to castle and bolsters the central pawn structure, creating a harmonious defensive setup. Castling secures the king and prepares to connect the rooks, a vital step in initiating active operations. Securing the king's safety against the central pressure is a fundamental step, preparing to challenge the knight's aggressive outpost. Centralizing the rook on the e-file now prepares for potential pawn advances or pressure on the d5 pawn, a sensible consolidation of forces. Securing the kingside perimeter, this pawn advances, though it creates a slight light square weakness in the long run. Unveiling the queen eyes the queenside, potentially targeting the uncastled king's sanctuary and adding pressure along the open file. Solidifying the center and preparing for a queenside pawn push, this retreat wisely avoids further tactical complications after white's aggressive queen maneuver. Developing the bishop to f4 now aims to improve coordination and potentially challenge black's center control. This maneuver subtly reroutes the bishop, aiming to reinforce the queenside and prepare for potential pawn breaks while white's pieces remain somewhat uncoordinated. This maneuver expertly repositions the bishop, seeking to exploit the weakened light squares around black's king should they ever become a target. Reorienting the knight to a more active central square, aiming to escape white's bishop pressure. Shifting the queen to qb3 pressures the queenside and prepares for a potential pawn push, but momentarily neglects central control. Asserting queenside presence, this move challenges the central control and prepares for potential pawn advances on that flank. Sacrificing the bishop opens the e-file for your rook and disrupts black's queen and bishop coordination. Reclaiming the e-file with the rook solidifies black's central presence and prepares for potential battery formations against white's king. Exchanging queens simplifies matters, aiming to exploit black's slightly passive piece development in the ensuing middle game. Reclaiming the pawn on b6, black begins to reintegrate their pieces, aiming to counter white's queenside pressure. Boldly venturing the knight to b5 targets the exposed queenside pawns and aims to disrupt black's structure. Restoring a knight to the center offers a vital outpost and challenges white's central ambitions. Opening up the f-file grants access for your rook, potentially targeting black's underdeveloped kingside. Challenging the bishop's outpost on b4 aims to dislodge a key defender and open diagonals. Establishing control of the open central file is crucial for future maneuvering. This move reclaims the vital central d-file, preparing for a potential rook lift and creating long-term pressure. Repositioning the knight to a more active square, eyeing central influence and preparing potential pawn breaks. Exchanges on g3 simplify the position, opening the h-file and potentially preparing a rook lift for black. Opening the h-file now grants kingside attacking potential, though it also creates potential weaknesses around the white king. Reactivating the bishop to a more active diagonal aims to redeploy it effectively, potentially supporting future pawn advances or challenging white's central control. Securing the queenside territory with this pawn advance prevents black's bishop from finding refuge on b4 and supports the knight's potential journey to c5. The pawn advances, a tentative step to stake a claim on the kingside, perhaps aiming to disrupt white's pieces. Asserting pressure on the c-file with this rook aims to provoke weaknesses in black's pawn structure or prepare for file domination. Opening the c-file for powerful piece activity, black seeks to exploit the unprotected kingside. Consolidating control of the crucial open c-file by this recapture is paramount. The rook seeks active placement, aiming to support the passed pawn and contest the now open file for potential endgame pressure. Repositioning the knight aims to increase pressure on the kingside and potentially prepare for a kingside pawn push. Reinforcing the bishop's central presence, this move prepares to contest the crucial c-file and aims to improve the bishop's scope. Shifting the king toward the center aims to improve its defensive capabilities and prepare for potential kingside activity later. Refocusing the king from the center allows for potential defense of the queenside pawns and prepares for pawn advancement. Repositioning the knight to a more active square, eyes now fixed on controlling the center and potentially supporting a pawn advance. A tactical regrouping is initiated, aiming to dislodge white's knight and potentially exploit the weakened dark squares. Consolidating the rook to a more active file now, aiming to improve its presence. Shifting the monarch towards the queenside pawns, a subtle attempt to activate dormant pieces and potentially support a breakthrough. Reclaiming the b-file opens a critical pathway for white's rook to engage black's less active pieces. Reorganizing the bishop to a more active diagonal is a sound positional maneuver. Recapturing the knight repositions it to a more active central square, ready to support an eventual kingside attack. Centralizing the king initiates a crucial endgame maneuver to contest key squares. Reasserting knight dominance on a key square, white aims to disrupt black's tentative piece maneuvering. Repositioning the bishop to b8 aims to solidify the queenside pawn structure against further advances and prepares for potential endgame maneuvers. A desperate tempo grab to disrupt black's king's safety and activate the knight. Trading bishops unlocks a dangerous open file for white's rook, creating immediate pressure. Unlocking a central pawn majority, this advancement aims to seize the initiative and threaten to dominate the board's core. This knight's journey to e8 seeks to unblock the c-file for potential activity and offers a defensive rerouting against the bishop's control. Knight repositions to the strong central outpost, eyeing the isolated pawn and preparing to support king's safety. Baffling retreat, the rook abandons the important c-file, allowing white to solidify their central pawn presence and prepare for further territorial expansion. Asserting control over the center with this pawn push aims to restrict black's knight and build a more robust pawn structure. Fortifying the central pawn structure and preparing for potential pawn pushes on the kingside. Recapture the central knight to gain activity and potentially pressure black's underdeveloped queenside pawns. Activating the rook on the queenside offers new attacking avenues while preparing to challenge white's knight. Repositioning the knight to better eye the d5 pawn after the pawn advances. a decisive repositioning into the enemy's territory, aiming to destabilize the knight's patrol and disrupt white's intended pawn's march. Activating the king from its passive corner position to participate in the central struggle is a timely initiative, aiming to support the pawn advance and potentially create new attacking avenues. The rook's redeployment to the c-file seeks to activate it on an open column, potentially harassing the white king. A sudden centralizing strike, aiming to dominate the open d-file and pressure black's isolated pawn.